We are met today to try to launch a new movement, bagong sistema, bagong, anong bago? Pag-asa. In order to have a successful bagong sistema and bagong pag-asa, I think it's good to look back into the lessons of history. A constitutional convention is directly affected by the pervasive future facing its members. And that convention may succeed or perish by the challenges confronting them. In 1935, our leaders were Quezon, Osmeña, and the Commonwealth authorized a constitutional convention, which was led by the distinguished President Recto. He was assisted by Manuel Rojas and others, but the vision of independence within 10 years was a prodding for the Constitutional Convention. It had a bright prospect of a vision to become a reality for us as a new nation. In 1968, the Philippine Congress called for a non-partisan election in 1970 to choose 320 qualified men and women to comprise the Constitutional Convention of 1971. The election took place, but the interventions did not. The parties intervened. Malacanang intervened. And therefore, those who won, those who lost, blamed the results on the intervention of others. It was a controversial election, but we decided to go ahead because that was the mandate of Congress. When we started work in the CONCON, the nation's president was Ferdinand Marcos. He was on his second term, which was to expire in 1973. And there were speculations becoming more rife that early there was a desire for an extension of the 1973 deadline, that it was perhaps better to change from a presidential to a parliamentary form of government. And it was also rumored that a new solution like martial law could resolve many problems facing the nation. And the hotline between Malacanang and the Manila Hotel where the Constitution was held was getting hotter and hotter. For example, when we began and there were committees formed, the form of government early on decided we will maintain the presidential form of government for the following reasons. But after the chairman signed the approval and the record and the report were submitted to the main steering council, there was a information that Malacanang had changed its mind on the form of government, that Malacanang wanted not a presidential, but a parliamentary form of government. And therefore, there was some confusion. And the chairman, behind his back, was the victim of many speculations. But he was under pressure. And what did he do? Instead of insisting on the presidential form, he gathered the committee again and asked them to change the recommendation from presidential to parliamentary. And therefore, he added his signature to that historic report, no longer presidential, but parliamentary. It was like a confusion of a supposed betrothed who thought that he had won a woman, only to find out later that it was not so, that the woman was not his, that the woman refused and rejected him. And therefore one of the delegates said, "My golly, this was terrible that in a matter of minutes they could change the report recommending the form of government. And they may add martial law. And according to that delegate, the only thing worse than martial law is marital rule. Marital rule by a wife who is dominant over the husband." After that, the chairman succumbed a little, but still persisted in the flow of instructions from Malacanang. But despite such pressures, there were a number of delegates in that constitution who were brave enough to do what was right, even in the face of grave peril to their own lives. And one delegate from the Visayas, as a matter of fact from Leyte, Eduardo Quintero, humbly but courageously stood up one day and said to the president, "Mr. President, may I speak out for a few minutes and take the attention of this assembly to say something vital which I believe affects the nature of this convention." And so everybody listened and strained out what the delegate Quintero was going to say. He said that he was being bribed. Specific amounts by the thousands of pesos were being directly deposited by someone to his account in the Provident Bank of Manila. And he showed copies of the document. He did not know, he said, "I do not know what this is for, but I suspect that it is for something that would make me do an item contrary to my conscience, and therefore I thought it best to expose it so that the entire convention and the entire nation, as a matter of fact, should know that they should not make a mockery of what we are doing in this convention. To prevent more briberies, to prevent more mockeries for the convention. Terror struck. The Manila Hotel Convention Center was bombed. And when it later transferred to the government hall in Quezon City, it was bombed again. Thank God, no deaths, no injuries. But on the evening of April 21, 1971, while the Liberal Party was launching their candidates before the people, 2 hand grenades were thrown to the stage and to the masses gathered around to listen to the proclamation. More than 9 people were killed and caused injuries to more than 90 others. Amongst them, Senator Salonga, Senator Osmeña, and others. Perhaps history will eventually unravel who were those responsible for the bloody assault. President Marcos blamed the communists, and he cited a communist plot to destabilize government. He assumed an emergency and suspended the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus, a prelude to martial law. And therefore we plodded on, and as the months grew, we had debates, but the debates were always under the cloud of Malacanang. And where Malacanang is interested, we fought, we debated, we thought we won the debates, but we lost the tally. Shortly before September 21, 1972, we held a dinner with some congressmen, some senators, including Ninoy Aquino. And he was asked, as the subject matter was on the coming martial law, and they were asked, if martial law is imposed, do we continue the convention? Or should it be suspended because we cannot debate freely as free men under the gun, the sight of the guns, under martial law? There were much discussion, opinions, but we left that meeting with no clarified response. At any rate, it was Ninoy Aquino who said that he personally believed that the palace would wait for the final changes in the Constitution before clamping down martial law upon the people. For why should the president, he said, impose the military rule if he can easily get the changes through specific political amendments more easily. We disbanded that meeting under clouds of doubt. On September 22nd, the shrill of the telephone before the silence of my bedroom at 4 o'clock in the morning woke me up. And it was my brother Ben on the other side of the line and said, "Have you heard? Marcos declared martial law. He's having people arrested, picked up. Ninoy Aquino, Pepe Diokno, some delegates, and many others." What I responded, I was half awake, and I said, martial law, people being arrested. Let us meet after breakfast. We have to look into this and see what we should do. Over the weekend, we discussed the dark issues without clear answers. And on Monday, when the convention opened under martial rule, Delegate Calao, for example, broached the idea of calling for a suspension of the convention until after the lifting of martial law. We agreed to support him, and he said he had communicated the proposal with President Macapagal, and he indicated that he was not only amenable but also enthusiastic. When we entered the convention hall that fatal day, we saw that the Marcos delegates had turned out in full force and learned that instructions had been given to fight off any move to suspend and to continue the convention under the bidding of Malacanang. And therefore we had a valiant but futile try. Hardly had Delegate Calao presented his motion when he was drowned out by objections and other interventions, forcing the chair to yield and subsequently declare the motion lost. About a dozen delegates were picked up, I think including Senator Nene Pimentel. Please acknowledge. And placed in prison. I don't know where Nene was. Camp Crame. And then I think he was also in Cebu. And then I think Mindanao. He go to places in prison many times, many places. Nene. And for him we salute. A good hero, a man, a fighter. Many delegates did not attend after that. Many of them were in the provinces, and after the declaration of martial law, they never returned to Manila. And there were many who thought that going to the convention was useless and inconvenient and dangerous to participate. And therefore, it was a convention laid to waste, a convention that was useless because of power that was given us a shed from outside. In late November, Malacanang finished the supposed constitution by themselves, by their own men, crafting it, inserting what they wanted, taking out what they thought was not ideal. And it was scheduled for final approval by the people in a plebiscite through secret balloting. But no plebiscite was held. No secret balloting. Instead, assemblies were held in many places, and they were asked, gusto ba niyong nagugutom na ba kayo? Gusto ba niyong kumain na? Taas ang kamay. Maraming gustong kumain. And that was the ratification of the Constitution of 1971. It was not only a waste, it was a rank disorder and a shame for the nation, which we should never allow to happen again, and I think will never happen if the bagong sistema and bagong pag-asa triumphs in the near future. But history will eventually merit those in the convention who tried their best, those who resisted unlawful suppression, those who fought the weapons of martial law, those who struggled for what was right. And I am proud to cite, I think there are 3 of us here, Delegate Pabling Trillanes, Delegate Abueva, Secretary Abueva, a very good secretary in the convention, who could not hear the instructions from Malacanang. And again, a man like Nene Pimentel. That, my friends, was what happened yesterday. Today, we plan bagong sistema, bagong pag-asa. We no longer see such threats as martial rule, and I hope never again. Instead, we see a relative future that can lead us to prepare for a constitution which will be undertaken not only by the nation's leaders, but also by interested and able participants of social and economic matters. They themselves will be part of the Constitutional Convention that will craft a new basic law. We therefore congratulate the movement, and assuming that the Bangsamoro law turns out well, the nation's focus can eventually center on the bagong sistema, bagong pag-asa, whose efforts into formulating a new constitution can bring in a new and vibrant constitution, one that will move government to tap the resources of the nation for more jobs and justice, a better justice, because the Filipino in faith and freedom deserves to build our country and to build a bigger and better nation so that we can help others. And by then, the Filipino can say, I am a Filipino. Amongst millions who live in these 7,000 islands, where you have friends here in the nation, I stand to help you so that together we can build a better world for all. Mabuhay ang Filipino. Thank you.